In this video, I'm going to show you how to create 4 different doodle designs in black and white that can then be used as collage fodder. Hello, my name is Catherine Rains. I'm a mixed media collage artist, and welcome to Tune In Tuesday, where I share weekly art demos to expand your mixed media toolbox. If you see value in my videos, I would deeply appreciate a thumbs up, and if you would subscribe to my channel. Links for all the supplies to make these papers are down below under Show More, and while you're there, you might want to check out my free 5-day class where I show you how to take all the papers made during Tune In Tuesday and turn them into fabulous collages the very first try. So let's start doodling. This week, we are doing doodle papers. Now, I think some people might call this Zendangle papers. I think that's the technical term. I don't know. I'm not a Zendangle drawer. I'm not a drawer for that matter. But I have been saving these kinds of videos on Instagram for a really long time, thinking, God, wouldn't that be great collage fodder? So I eventually said, why don't you just try it? So I did. So I'm going to do 4 today, and I actually have so many more. I'm going to do 4 more in a part 2. I'm actually going to take these particular papers and join them with the 4 papers before this, which, if I can name them all off, I had string art, I had alcohol paper, I had kind of water dropping on paper, and paint skins. So I'm going to pull them all together and show you how I would do a collage using the last 5 papers I've been doing. First, we'll do 2 weeks of doodle papers, and I'll show you how to make these. Now, the reason I chose the ones I did were because I think these would make the most beautiful collage fodder. If you look at Zendangle artists on Instagram, they're making really complicated images, which for me, I don't think they would lend to my kind of collage. I don't think they would actually add to it. So I was picking specifically ones that I think could. And by the way, I never know. When I'm making collage papers, I don't know if these are going to work or not. But what I'm doing is whatever I'm attracted to, that's what I try. And that's what I share with you. So I'm going to share these 4. And let me start with the materials you need. So I'll just put these aside. I am using this mixed media paper, and I just cut it into smaller little pieces. Now, you certainly can use copy paper, you can use drawing paper, but I tried it on different kinds of paper, and I found what I'm going to be doing works better if I have a little bit of more tooth to this, a thicker paper, because I'm going to be putting markers on it, and I don't want that marker to go through. I'm also going to be putting some tape on it for one of these, and when I used copy paper, the tape actually pulled up some of the paper, so I didn't want that. So if I used a heavier paper, it worked better. I also have some black drawing paper. It worked beautifully. It was actually the reel I did, so that was this one, but it's much thinner, so it did pull up a little bit, and I'll show you that when I get there. The other thing you need are pens. Most people know what Stabilo pencils are, but this is a Stabilo brush marker, which I'm going to use today, which I'm completely in love with. This is like my favorite probably pen of all time, Jelly Roll. Some people told me on Instagram that they had a hard time keeping the ink flowing with this. I've never had a problem with this, so I don't know, maybe it's just magic, but I've had a number of these over the years, and they always work really well for me. This is a new one for me, Faber-Castell Pitt pen, big brush pen. It's not that big, really. By the way, the reason I went and bought some more pens was because I started this entire demo, or I should say experimenting with this entire demo, using Sharpies. Most of the Zendangle artists I saw were using Sharpies. So I thought, okay, let me do that. And I don't do this kind of work, so I didn't know. But then I just had this inkling in my head. I thought, I bet this is not archival. And lo and behold, these fade. So I had to actually redo the papers I did. And I wanted to get something like a Sharpie, which is this, except this is archival. So these are bad. Don't use these. So let me put that aside. The first one we're going to do is the one I actually did on Instagram. The way you start this is you need to put down tape. So this is one of the things I got at the art supply store this week. This is repositionable acid-free tape, and this is a 1/4 inch wide. And I realized that once I did it with a 1/4 inch, this is what it looks like in the end result with a 1/4 inch. That's really bigger than I wanted. This is the one I showed in the reel. I wanted a thin tape. So all I did is I just you know, got a really big piece of this and I just cut it in half. By the way, this tape is so cool because it's literally repositionable. A bit positionable? Is that the right word? Anyways, I can actually use it over and over again. I mean, not a tremendous number of times, but it's not a one-time thing. So I cut some long pieces here. And the first step here is to kind of randomly place these in some kind of designs that I think might look interesting. Now let's try something like this. Now when I showed this on Instagram, I did it on black paper. So I just want to show something a little different. Then, let's see, I'm just going to keep kind of dissecting this original thing. I think something like that. I mean, this seems so incredibly simple, right? And it is simple. What was challenging about it was knowing how thick a marker to do in terms of how I liked it. So I wish you were here. You could say, no, try that. So I think that would look good. And we'll do one more like that. So just like all different shapes on here. I'm just going to cut these off just so they're not in my way. I mean, I experiment with different size pins. I'm pretty crazy about these little Stettler pins. I've got them in 0.3 and 0.7. I like both of them, but the 0.3 was just my personal favorite. I liked a really thin point. So all you do is you just take your pin and you just draw a swirl. And now when I begin a swirl, it looks good. And then I start getting a little wonky around it. So I just keep. And interestingly enough, even though some of my swirls I think are pretty wonky, you know, they're pretty shaky, once I get in the outer circles here, once you do the entire thing, fill in every single one of these little squares, it doesn't look wonky because something about it it ends up looking, I think, really, really cool. In this particular white one, this design on white, I love for a piece of collage fodder. So just keep going around. See, it looks really wonky here, but once I pulled the tape off, I found that I actually liked it, even though, you know, my hand wasn't completely steady. And then you just fill in the blanks. Oops, that's a little wide. I mean, nothing magical. Well, of course, I think it's all magical. I have to tell you, I spent hours and hours and hours doing these. I have quite a few of them. Just because they're so relaxing to do. I think so. That's why people love, you know, making, which I'm thinking could be referred to as zing dangle. It's just that what I'm doing is so simplistic, the designs, and I've seen really amazingly complicated ones. I just don't think I could use them for collage fodder. So, like magic, let me show you one that is almost filled in. So I'm just going to do 2 here, and then I'm going to pull the tape off in front of you and show you how cool this is. I mean, this is kind of like, to me, kind of like knitting. You know, it's just kind of like mindless. And the reason I chose this as a paper this week is because I have a lot of color in my papers. Just needed something that was neutral, basically. But it still had some interesting design to it. So let me do one more. Now, by the way, I'm not being careful here at all. So if you think that you can't make swirls or you can't draw a straight line, the reason I got into collage years ago, which was now how many years? 30 years ago? Yeah, 30 years ago is when I started did my first collage. I started collage because I always said I couldn't draw or paint. And that drew me to just, you know, tearing up magazines. So for a very long time, I just tore magazines up and made collages. Eventually, I added paint to them, but it was a long time coming, let's say halfway through, like 15 years. This looks totally wonky, but once I pull the tape off, I've been surprised at how much I like them, even though, you know, I'm not terribly careful with my lines. So what we're going to do is just pull the tape off. Okay, there you go. And this little tape here, I could put it right back on there and use it for a second one. And I did do that. You know, in some of these I just kept using the same paper over, the little tape, over and over again. I mean, even though my lines are wonky. By the way, I don't think I've ever used the word wonky in my life. I think that's the first time I've ever used it, but it's a pretty good description of how uneven my lines are. By the way, this is the first time that I have done a demo, at least that I can remember, without gloves on. So it's kind of like nice. I don't have a paint apron on, which I really like not having a paint apron on because, you know, a little change of pace here. But doesn't that look cool? I think I have two more. So this is actually 1/2 inch tape. And this is, that's 1/4 inch tape, 1/2 inch. Oh, so this would be 1/4 inch tape. You can actually buy it that small, but I was thinking this is more versatile, which I think is true. So I've got a whole collection of these. Now, another thing you can do with this is take, like, you can take this really thick marker and trace around these. So I did this with, this is the 1/2 inch. And that's okay. I mean, I might even like think about cutting that out. In fact, that would be actually really, really attractive. I can see myself doing that, you know, instead of like using like that little piece for a collage fodder, cut these out in triangles and use them as, and I might do that, but I'm gonna wait until I see what I need on my collage before I do that, because overall, I like the aesthetic of it without that line, but I may not use it as a whole piece. Number 2 is I'm going to take 2 pens. So I'm going to take this new pen that I'm crazy about. This is a Stabilo marker. And this is my same pen. This is a number 3 Stettler pen. Take the lids off both of them. Actually, yeah, take the lids off both of them. And I'll line these up so the points are pretty close to each other. I'm going to take one of my leftover pieces of tape. I'm hoping this will hold this. But I got to get those 2 points pretty close together and see if I can wrap this around. So I want the 2 pieces, 2 pins to be pretty attached. So I'm going to, we're going to pretend this is the back side. So see how that works. Okay. So this is so simple, but I had to practice it like 10 times to get this the way I wanted it, and we'll see if it works. Okay, so the way you do this, so I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to do loops. Yeah, that's good. And then unattach these. And this is just so simple, but you know, most of us doodling is. You literally just draw lines in between the 2 lines. And because this will take a long time, I know because I've been doing it, let me show you one that's almost done. So this is probably going to be one of my, it's the simplest thing, but it's going to be one of my favorite pieces of collage fodder, because right there, if I cut that off or cut off a little piece of that, that'll be a gorgeous piece of collage fodder. And because there's so much white in it, it will just add a lot of, I don't know, just some variety, you know, in the collage itself. So I just keep filling in the lines. And I realized I've got one done. Actually, this one's done. So I don't have to actually finish the whole thing, but you get the idea. So you're just filling in these little lines, and it makes like tracks. I just totally am in love with this. It's interesting, this one actually has a darker black line than this. I must have used, I have a couple other pens that have bigger tips, so I probably used a darker one. To me, the darker one is even more effective because it's a lot of contrast. So that's number 2. Number 3, I'm going to take, really attached to this one, and I'm just going to draw some lines. So I'm going to draw some straight lines. By the way, if your lines aren't straight, that's perfectly fine. And then just draw some lines from that. And then some line, you're kind of doing the same thing as the first one, except you're just doing it with a pen instead of doing it with tape. Let's see, so I want lots of different angles in the lines I make. Let's see. Okay, let me see. I'm going to start with this one right here. And you start making lines. So I made my first line within this box, turn it around, and I make another line. I'm making about, it's like 1/4 of an inch line, and I keep making it inside the one I did before. Now that one's a little smaller, doesn't make any difference, but you try to make them as uniform as possible. At least that was my aesthetic, the what I liked. Now I saw a couple artists doing these in a much more complicated way. Like they did the same thing, but the end result of this, they did a lot of shading to make it look three-dimensional. To me, that was not necessary for what I wanted it for, so I didn't do the extra shading. And that's not really my aesthetic. It's not really what I want to do with these. Now it gets complicated. It's like, where do I put that line? So you just kind of constantly splitting it in half until I finally get a triangle. So I'm getting a triangle right there. So let me show you one that's almost done. So let me just finish this one off. It's amazing how simple this is, yet how many I had to do in practice before I got the look I wanted. Because I tried a few of these that the lines were too thin, and then it just didn't appeal to me. That doesn't mean it was wrong. In fact, that one's a really thin line too. I like when the line is about 1/8 of an inch thick. It just aesthetically pleases me more. And then I'm basically gonna make a little triangle. So actually let me just do one more just to finish this off. So I'll do this one corner here. It's a little complicated when you're in a corner like this. It's like, okay, so because there's no line. Okay, that's the line. Okay, I'm totally gonna mess this up. I don't know where my line is, so I'm just gonna put it like that, and then I have no idea. Okay, so okay, pretend you don't see that part. Okay, because I don't know what to do with it. However, what I am gonna do, this marker is too thin. If I was going to use this as collage fodder, I just wouldn't use that corner because I just ruined the pattern. But this marker is particularly cool for just filling this in because it's got a tip that makes it a nice, you can draw a nice, it fills in the lines really nice, but it also makes a really thick line at the same time. I'm going to have to probably buy this. I'm hoping they actually make this in white because someone on Instagram today said they had a really hard time with the jelly rolls. And if this came in white, this could be a solution for that jelly roll. So you get the idea. And you don't need to do the little triangles, but I think that adds to it. This one's also a wonky one, this line right there. So ideally, I'd want to have triangles all the way over it. Here's another triangle. That's why it takes a little practice. But if I was going to use this as collage fodder, it's this piece right here that I love. In fact, I most likely will use that. I think that's really lovely. When we do collage papers, not the entire paper is something we necessarily use. We can be selective in what we're actually using. Now, number 4, the last one. For those of you who took Collage Kickstart with me, more than likely, you have collected a lot of bottle caps. So this one is a ode to that one. So what you do, I'm going to take, again, my skinny pin, which is my 0.3 Stettler, and I just make a bunch of circles. Now, I could just use one uniform size. So I could use this and put this all over, or I could mix this up a little bit and get all different kinds of circles, which I've done, unfortunately, or fortunately, because I was having so much fun. I'm sorry, this is just like knitting to me. Some of you who actually do this kind of work, like this is more part of your work, like maybe you do Zendangle, this is kind of child's play because I'm doing the simple stuff. However, it's so freaking gorgeous. So I'll just do a couple more, but I'll show you how I actually fill this in. So by the way, I could do this entire page right here just with circles. And I think I did one last night actually because I kept thinking, oh, well, suppose I do this. Oh, suppose I do this. I just keep trying. Like, what else could I do? And I came up with a whole page of these circles. This would make fantastic collage fodder. But if I was doing it with just this, I'd probably want to use a thicker pencil, because I think it might be more striking. But the idea is that you keep overlapping the ones before it. Okay, let me show you this one. So this one, I just did it with a white pen. It was the same idea. I did overlapping. And the idea here is that you just keep filling in the little area right here that is not touching. So you don't want two things to be touching each other. So like there's a circle in the middle of there, nothing that's not touching anything. So now this is the Jelly Roll pen. And the only problem, or if you call this a problem, with using a Jelly Roll on this black is that it comes out kind of sketchy like that, you know, so it's not a solid block of ink, but I'm going to show you how to fix this. So this Jelly Roll ink comes out very wet, so I actually had white all over my hand last night as I was doing this, because if you put your hand against this, it comes off on your hand. Let me just fill this one in and I'll show you. So what you can do is once this is dry, but like this had some holes in it, I can fill them in with this so that it's more solid. Although I kind of like the variegated look as well, but like that becomes more solid if I fill it in. Now the other option, these right here are so solid white because last night I actually took some white gesso and just took a very thin brush and started painting them in. So that's the other option. But see how like that's so grainy there? I would wait till that's dry. Actually, I could put some white right on top of it. I'm gonna have to wait till it completely dries and I could fill it in. Or you could just paint it with white paint to begin with. So let me show you a couple other options. This one is just this larger bottle cap. It's the only one I used, and I barely overlapped it. Now, this doesn't look as interesting, but when you're talking about collage fodder, it could be really interesting because I would just use a little piece of it. You know, so you're just doing a little piece. So I think that's really pretty. Now, here's another one that just used one size bottle, you know, all over it. And I'm gonna fill it in with this pen because this pen just has a really nice tip to it and it fills things in really fast. So what this feels like is, you know how you colored as a kid and you wanted to stay in the lines? I mean, to me, in order to make this look good, I do need to stay in the lines. But it just fills it in really quick. This pen's like brilliant. And I actually made this one, you know, with more uniform, you know, one size of bottle cap because I thought that the other ones looked too crazy. But then when I looked at it in hindsight, I went, no, actually, I like the crazy ones probably even better. Curious what your aesthetic is, because obviously there's not a aesthetic. I saw someone on Instagram who actually had done these circles, but she had done them in red, and it was, it's just like, woo! And the only reason I'm not is because I really need some neutral papers. I've got I have a lot of colorful papers, and I need something that's a little toned down to make this, you know, make it usable for my collages. During the question and answers of Tune In Tuesday, some people suggested other pens other than this Jelly Roll, which I'm completely in love with. But the result of the Jelly Roll on a black piece of paper, it's difficult to get really good coverage. So I went through my own stash to see if I had any other kinds of white pens, and lo and behold, I have a paint marker pen. I've also got a Posca pen, both white. This is a very large nib, so this is harder to work with. That was actually this. I actually filled it in. But this little paint marker is amazing. But I can go right over what I had already done with the gel pen, and it covers it up really nicely. So if I take a brand new one here, it just covers it beautifully from the get-go. So thanks to those of you who were there for the live portion of this, got me looking at my own stash to see if I had something that worked better than a gel pen. Although I love my white gel pen, this actually works quite well. And you know, this one that I did with the Jelly Roll, I can fill that in. It has more of an opaque look, so it's not so kind of drawn in. Although the drawing, you know, the kind of variegated look of that is beautiful too. It all depends on personal taste. But I'm going to spend a few minutes just to make all this uniform and fill in all of these. So thank you for joining me for Tune In Tuesday. I'm honored that you show up and watch this, whether you're doing it live or the replay. And I will be back next week with another paper, which will actually be part 2 of this demo. Have a blessed week. Bye-bye.